with Genie and the Inquisitor, it can be, especially when, I mean, for me, it can be harder depending on the frame of mind. There are definitely times where if I've been working on a novel and then I want to write some short stories, there's this part of my brain that's like, oh, you need to expand on this, you need to expand on this. It's like, that's not the purpose of the short story. Keep it literally short. That's the whole focus. So this side character that you want to build out because I think of something, that's not the purpose of this short story. Keep it contained, like you mentioned. So something like the Genie and the Inquisitor, there's this backstory that I allude to. There's this, I mean, there are huge implications in that short story, like metaphysical, cosmic, mythical. There are so many different things potentially that you could explore. And I was like, ultimately, what this is about is this direct interaction between this magical creature and this kind of trope of the genie that always will twist your wish into something evil, and this guy who we can tell from what he says has experienced something that gives him a vendetta against these creatures. And how is he going to best one of them? What is his objective? What is his purpose? And then a revelation at the end. But I leave so much of it completely just up to the reader's imagination and undescribed. And in my mind, I kind of have it. I know where it's supposed to go. But, or like, if I wanted to expand on it, I have a sense of what these things are. But that's not what the story is about. And I kind of think of it in relation with novels. I try to look at it as empowerment because I love writing and I love that I get to do this. And so it's two different types of freedom, basically. In a novel, you get the freedom to explore. It's a little bit like if anybody's a video gamer, it's like an open world game. If you're playing like Skyrim or something classic. And I get to like, I could stay on the main mission if I want to, or I could just help this person in this random town find their lost sword in this cave. And I can do whatever I want. I can just go wherever and explore. And in a novel, to a certain, there's a certain limit, but for the most part, if I want to like write about something way off base from the main story, I can at least dive into it a little bit. That's freeing, but at the same time, you still need, it can be overwhelming. And so there's a different freedom with short stories of sometimes you just want to be on the rails. It's the difference between playing like Skyrim and playing like a first person shooter where it's like all those doors you're walking past, none of them open. Like the game is telling you, go this way, this is where the objective is. And that, in a way, is kind of a different level of freedom. I don't have to worry about, like I mentioned earlier, there's a side character here. Do I need to explore more and flesh them out? Nope. It's a short story. The expectation is they're here, give them a name, the basics, keep it moving, and you get to just go to the finish line. There's all this, like I said, mythology that I could have explored and things that I introduce. Do I have to dive deep into it? Nope. This is supposed to be about, ultimately, the focus on this interaction between these two people. It's a two-hander, as they say. It's a play, and that's what it's about. No Hungry Generations is one of my favorite things that I've ever written, I think. It started off as a joke story. And it's a story about this family that is pretty well off, and they've got land, and leading into the Thanksgiving season, they kill a bird that is bigger than a turkey, not quite a turkey, and they eat it, and that has very unexpected, very horrific repercussions. Without giving away too much of it, but it's present in. I mean, you could, anybody who's interested, you can actually read it for free on a Pseudopod, which is a publication that's been extraordinarily good to me in the past, and it's also present in Midnight Somewhere, my collection. And discovering with that, it's interesting. This dynamic I just talked about, the freedom. That was supposed to be a joke story, and then somewhere in the beginning of writing it, I started liking the characters. I gave them a few jokes and the interaction between each other, and I was like, I kind of like these people. And the weird part about that was, because I liked them so much, I wanted to give them a little bit more meat on the bone, so to speak, no pun intended, for what their fates are going to be. And I think I ended up doing meaner things to them because I liked them. Like, where I originally envisioned that story going, it's a horror story. I don't think it's giving away too much to say, some people die and some bad things happen. My original way I was going to do that, though, was mostly just gonna be jokes, and it didn't really matter that much, and there was no real heartbreak or any like kind of um horrific sensations associated with it. And then I started liking the characters, and I was like, I got to do justice by them. Well, doing justice by them, the way I was writing this story was, they need to feel it. The family dynamic, when people start dying off, there needs to be some real impact behind it, and that is so much meaner and worse and more cruel than if I'd kept it as a joke. It's a weird inverse relationship between, you're a joke so you actually get off a little bit easier, versus I actually like you guys and I want to treat you well, which means I'm going to treat you actually a little bit worse in terms of the story dynamic. And that was the story that made me really kind of discover that that's what I was really doing. I've been doing that to characters for however long I've been writing short stories. I've been published as a short story author, at least since like, I say 2006. It's actually a little earlier, but none of those stories are even available anymore, so I just say 2006. But for that length of time, I've been doing that to characters and not really appreciating or realizing it until I wrote No Hungry Generations. The Death Grip Challenge started off as again, kind of a joke story. The Bird Box Challenge is the genesis of that idea. And people were, if anybody remembers Bird Box, it's the movie you can't look, basically, you can't go outside, you can't look at anything. There's these creatures out there that will just basically destroy your mind if you see them and drive you murderously insane. And people were doing quote unquote a Bird Box challenge online of like trying to blindfold themselves and navigate around the house and injuring themselves. And so I thought, oh, this would be fun to create a book, or create a story rather, in a universe surrounding this kind of challenge. And then it starts going awry. And again, I started off thinking this would be mostly pretty funny and just kind of silly. And it's a father-daughter dynamic, ultimately, that story. And again, kind of started writing jokes between the two, and the interplay between the two became a lot more heartfelt. And to the extent that that actually usurped what was going to be the rest of the story. Originally, when I wrote Death Grip Challenge, it was about twice as long as the version that it exists as now. Because that father-daughter dynamic was being matched with the societal impact of this challenge and what's really going on with this movie that comes out and influences this challenge, and then there's suggestions of a supernatural happening, and I kept going back and forth between the two. And then I couldn't sell the story because it's most short story markets are not going to go for a story that long. As it is, I think the finalized version of it is about 5,000-ish words, somewhere in there, maybe closer to 6,000. I can't quite remember, but if it's twice as long, 12,000. A lot of markets are just like, that's 10,000 words is our cutoff. And if you have something at 10,000 words, like, that's usually extraordinarily rare for them to buy. So I was like, I need to shave this just to be able to sell it. And then it became, well, what's more important, the father-daughter dynamic or this challenge? And I was like, well, the father-daughter dynamic, definitely. And so then that becomes, well, as I'm rewriting it, it's not just a matter of yanking out that other dynamic. It's like, now I need to make sure that the father-daughter focus is as rich as possible. And then that draws in the rest of the family. And it draws in these emotional components. And suddenly this story that starts off with jokes and kind of silliness turns on you and becomes something grimmer. And I've always admired when authors can kind of pull that off. It's a little bit of a magic trick. There's an author I really like, and a friend of mine, Bridget Brave, and I can't remember the name of her story, but she writes, I feel like, in this capacity, pretty often, because she's a really funny person, and she pulls that off very well. And yet I remember reading a story of hers once, and gosh, I'm gonna have to try to find that and post it on social media or something to give her proper exact credit for it. But I remember reading a story of hers, and it starts off so funny and so like satirical, and then once it makes the turn to where like, oh, we're getting to like the real horror of this, I remember like feeling extra gutted, because you're just not really truly expecting it. It's one thing to go into a story knowing it's going to be grim and knowing I'm going to watch Hereditary or something, and then it's another thing, similar I think to Hereditary, where it actually has jokes, And I feel like that kind of disarms the audience. And I think that's why it impacted people so much, because this is pretty funny in some places. Oh, maybe this isn't as, grim as I thought. And then heads start coming off